Ned Stark slept poorly in the Tower of the Hand. The night smelled of old stone and river mud, of a sea wind that reached through the city like a thief, and of the sweet rot of late summer. Candlelight hummed in the corners of his solar until it guttered, and the moon laid a pale sword's edge across the table where he had been writing letters, commands, pleas, all feints for time. When dawn stammered at the windows, he rose and washed his face in a basin of cold water and felt, for the first time since the raven that told of Jon Arryn's death, something like iron settle beneath his ribs. Varys slipped in as the first gulls cried over Blackwater Bay, waddling with his powdery grace, smelling faintly of lavender and ink. He carried no bells and no perfumes today. His head was naked of ornament, his eyes soft and unblinking. "He sleeps," the eunuch murmured, meaning Robert, meaning the king, meaning the man who had hunted too much wine with a boar. "The leechers think him beyond pain, though not beyond waking. He spoke in brokenness in the night. He thought you were Brandon. Forgive me my tidings." Ned dried his face and set the cloth aside. No forgiveness needed when truth arrives, however dressed. Varys folded his hands within ample sleeves. Truth dresses in many faces. Today she wears iron. Will you use it? Ned looked at the map of the city carved into the table's surface, the little wooden ships in the bay, the 7 gates, the fat, slow river. He found the tower of the city watch marked with a lion's head that some hand had scratched there years ago, and he thought of Janos Slint's eyes when the man smiled. He thought of Littlefinger's mouth when it lied. "What happens this day?" Ned said. "Must happen quickly." He met the eunuch's gaze. "You told me once I had a gift for mercy. Today I will be less merciful to lies. Mercy to truth may be cruelty to men," Varys said, and let his lower lip tremble, which was how he smiled. "Send for Janos Slint," Ned said. "I will speak with him before the bells ring." Varys inclined his head as if he were a servant in a noble hall and not the man who knew every key and whisper. "I will send him with haste. And Lord Baelish," Ned added. "Tell him the hand requires an accounting of funds for certain expenditures." Something blinked and was gone behind Varys's eyes. "I will summon him as well." The waking of the city came on like fever. Carts rattled across cobbles. Shutters clapped open to spill bread smells and wash water. The rag and bone men called their morning sing-song. Above it all the Red Keep stood aloof on Aegon's hill, and within its walls maids hurried while old men in gray robes went to and fro with hands tucked in sleeves, and Kingsguard moved with blank, clean faces, and below, beyond its walls, the gold cloaks of the city watch were changing posts. Ned watched them from a balcony while Tomard buckled a sword belt around his waist, while a sleepy boy brought meat and barley bread and did not look at the hand's face. He saw steel glimmer dark along the mud gate and at the gate of the gods. He saw morning light swimming along helms on the city walls. They came to him in the solar as the bell at the sept began to measure time in stones. 1, 2, the steady toll of a boy temple-frocked and indifferent. Janos Slint entered with a practiced bow, all deference, all belly and round cheeks and small, measuring eyes. Peter Baelish followed a breath later, as if he had just happened by and had decided on a whim to stroll in. He had a blue feather in his cap and a faint wine stink on his breath that somehow smelled like expensive grapes, not tavern muck. "Lord Hand," Janos said. "You asked for me." "Lord Stark," Peter said. "I woke to the strangest rumor. Something to do with roars and boars and kings and other bristling things. I thought to bring better news for a morning." Ned gestured to the chairs. "Seat." Slint remained standing. "I prefer to take my orders standing." His smile was a little crooked. "Then hear them," Ned said, and didn't sit either. Tomard stood behind him with his broad face and his sword like a slab here, a plank there, uncomplicated iron. "There will be no blood in the streets today. My men will not be murdered in the throne room. The city watch will not take coin from 2 pockets and pretend it belongs to 1 purse. I will not ask you to betray your oaths. I will ask you to keep them." Peter's eyebrows rose and fell, a bird tableau of surprise. "I will take this as a compliment, Lord Stark, though I suspect you don't mean it as one." Ned ignored him. He tossed a small chessman of Winterfell wood, the wolf, from hand to hand, not because he played but because he needed to see motion. Janos Slynt, how many men under your immediate command can you place at the Red Keep within an hour? Not men who drink with Lannister Redcloaks. Men who consider the city their master and the king their oath. Slynt rubbed his jaw. 100, surely. 200 if pressed. Press, Ned said. He opened a coffer on the table. The iron hinges complained softly. Inside, heavy sacks jostled and clinked. Your men are 3 months in arrears. You have complained to the council. The master of coin has assured you patience would be repaid. I repay. Today the watch is paid in full, arrears and hazard. Today the watch belongs to the city. Peter's eyes slid over the sacks of coin almost lovingly. I am a simple man, Lord Stark, but even my simple sums tell me that is more silver than the hand's purse holds for breakfasts and partridge pies. Might a humble fellow inquire whence? From me, Ned said. From my house. From my honor. He met Peter's eyes until the man looked away. I will not allow promises written in air to be the only thing that stands between a queen's desperation and a boy's sword. The watch is paid. Slynt had not moved. He looked at the sacks and then at Ned. We do not accept coin in private chests. It goes to the counting house. It is weighed and measured with witness. With witness, then, Ned said. He pushed one sack across the table. The weight dragged at the wood. To begin, Tomard will go with you to the barracks at the Mud Gate and the Lion Gate. He will witness the payment of 3 months' wages for the men you place in the Red Keep today and for the men who hold the gates. The gates! Slynt's glance sharpened. The gates of the city, Ned said. You will seal them. No one enters without leave of the hand. No retinues in Lannister Red will pass. No horses and no wagons except for bread, meat, and water, and those will be inspected. Do you understand me? He did not say why. He did not say whose retinues might ride through those gates if left open, nor from whom he meant to keep the city. He did not have to. Peter leaned back and twirled his feather. A siege without an army. How bold. I would clap, but my hands are small. Do not mistake quiet for softness, Ned told him and kept his voice level. Janos, do it. Slynt's cheeks had turned a mottled color. He looked at the coin again. He swung his eyes to Tomard, to Ned, to Littlefinger. He licked his lips. You ask much, he said softly. I ask the law, Ned said, and I pay in silver. If the law is not enough, I will pay more. But if I find you take from me and then from the lion as well, if even one of my men comes to me with blood on his cloak that is not his own, I will see you where heads are only allowed a single thought before they are gone. For a moment Janos Slynt's face was merely a face. Then he smiled fully, as if something he understood at last had opened in him like a purse's mouth. He bowed. The city watch belongs to the city, he said, and to the king. I will place my men. I will seal the gates, and I will do it now. He turned, and Tomard followed him, lifting one of the sacks as if it was a child asleep. Peter remained. Such iron, he said lightly. Careful you don't cut yourself with it, my lord. Might I be allowed to express some concerns? The council will not like the counting house to be surprised by this handsome donation. They are fussy about their books, you know, and the queen is fussy about her freedom of movement. Gates do not please queens, even when they are made of gold. The council will be told, Ned said. Oh, one more thing. I require the keys to the vaults. The jewels and plate of the crown are to remain where they are until further order. The master of coin should find this reasonable. The master of coin sleeps with his keys beneath his pillow, Peter said, and under his tongue, and buried in the garden. But if the hand commands, Ned said. He stepped closer, and perhaps it was the way his hand drifted toward the hilt that brought a stillness into the room. You will not leave the Red Keep today. You will come with me to the throne room. You will count with your eyes while Janos Slynt takes his men. Peter Baelish's mouth made a slow shape that might have been agreement and might have been a kiss. What company? What spectacle? The hand, the master of coin, the Lord Commander of the City Watch. Only the king is missing from our little mask. "He will not be long in missing," Ned said, and for a moment he tasted grief like copper. He let it wash through him and be gone. "We attend the throne." Before they left, he sent 2 men to bring Ser Barristan Selmy to the Tower of the Hand. Barristan entered with the same care he would carry a goblet across a battlefield. He inclined his white head to Ned and to Peter, and he barely glanced at Varys when the eunuch drifted back in like a sigh. "Ser Barristan," Ned said, "the king is failing." Barristan's jaw flexed. "So I have heard." He set his will to paper. "He named me protector of the realm until his rightful heir comes of age." "I wrote it," Barristan said, with something like old sorrow in his eyes. "The words were not mine. The hand was. I pray I have done honor to his." Ned nodded. "When the will is read, the queen will say there is a rightful heir, and she will name Joffrey. I will say otherwise. I will say the law names the king's brother, Lord Stannis." The old knight's face did not move. Only his hand crushed his white glove tighter. "Those are heavy words." "They are true," Ned said. "You have seen the royal children. A man could hold his tongue for a lifetime, Ser Barristan, but eyes will have their own tongues if we do not give them words. I will not say more." He glanced at Peter, who smiled faintly, and at Varys, who did not smile at all. "Not now, not here. I ask your oath, Ser Barristan. When the queen says what she will say, and when I say what I must, will you keep order in the throne room? Will you preserve the peace of the king's hall until the law is heard?" Barristan Selmy took a breath that caught. "I swore a sword to keep the king's peace. I swore a sword to keep the king's secrets. I do not know that both can live in one scabbard." "Keep the peace," Ned said, and felt how tired his voice became. "No blood. Not if you can help it. The city watch will stand ready, and Janos Slynt has been told the same, but I would not have a gold cloak touch a white. Keep the peace, Ser Barristan. That is all I ask of you." Barristan closed his eyes a moment. When he opened them, they were gray stone. "I will keep the peace." They walked down to the throne room together. The corridors of the Red Keep were a warren of torchlight and cold air that smelled of old ashes and of the sea. Every steward and candlebearer they passed seemed to expect music to start, the theme of some unremembered dance. They skittered away like mice. By the time Ned reached the great doors with their iron studs and carved demons, the hall beyond had begun to fill. Lords and ladies had come with their screens of grim-faced men, and behind them the little trickle of the city. Merchants in fine wool, 2 septons with soft hands, the ugly man who collected pig taxes, a girl with a ribbon wound through her hair like a promise. Sansa stood near the front, her eyes wide, a flush in her cheeks, ready to watch a dream unfold. Arya was nowhere and everywhere. Ned did not see her but felt the absence where she should have stood. Cersei wore green and gold. The green made her eyes cruel. Joffrey stood beside her with a hand on the hilt of a sword someone had given him to make him feel taller. Tommen fidgeted and Myrcella looked pale. Meryn Trant loomed behind them, and Boros Blunt, and Ser Mandon Moore in his smooth white mask of a face. Jaime's absence was a gap you fell into if you looked too hard. Pycelle had arranged his chains like a curtain and did not seem to notice. He ran a thick tongue across his teeth again and again as if counting. The will was read. Barristan's voice carried like a hymn drawn string by string. When he reached "my rightful heir," a murmur breathed across the hall like wind across wheat. Cersei smiled without teeth. She moved to take the parchment, and Ned let her take it and let everyone see it pass to her hand. She tore it in 2, and then in 4, as if the sound of ripping could be music over bells. Pages fluttered. The hall drew in the moment like a lung full of cold. "The king is not here to speak for himself," she said lightly, "but I, as his queen, as the mother of his son." She looked aside at Joffrey, who lifted his chin as if it were too heavy to hold. "I will say what he would say. Joffrey is of his blood. Joffrey is his heir. The Lord Stark will kneel and swear his sword to our son, or he will be shown the road north in irons." Her eyes brushed Ned. A flit of something like triumph moved behind her lids. Ned stepped forward. He did not raise his voice, but it carried. The king is not here to speak for himself, he agreed. But the law speaks. A queen's smile is not a law. A mother's claim is not a law. He turned and found Renly in green and gold at the edge of the dais, his mouth a line so thin it could cut you, and found Varys behind a pillar, and found Petyr Baelish at his shoulder. Littlefinger's breath brushed his ear like a kitten's paw. Joffrey is not the king's son, Ned said into the hall, and not his heir. The lawful heir of Robert Baratheon is his brother Stannis, Lord of Dragonstone. The hall broke into whispers, then into voices. Someone swore, someone laughed. Pycelle made a choking sound like a rooster with an egg too big for its throat. Cersei did not move at all. Only the skin around her mouth drew back. Joffrey turned his head towards her, boy and mother in a little mirror of desperation, then swaggered forward as if the floor were a rug he owned. "I am the king," he said. "I will have your head." Barristan Selmy took one step forward without drawing steel. "There will be no blood here." "You!" Joffrey flung out his hand. "You are only a shield, old man." "Enough," Ned said. He held one hand up, palm out, to the city watch. Janos Slynt stood just beyond the first line of columns with 200 men, iron helms and pale faces. "The gates are sealed," Ned thought. "The gates are sealed. The queen will retire to her apartments with her children and remain under guard," he said. "For their safety. Lord Renly, you will—" "No," Cersei said, with a mother's poison. "No, no, no. You think you can close the city and close my throat, wolf? Ser Mandon, Ser Meryn. Seize him. The first man who draws." Barristan's voice came from a distance and was suddenly very near. "Forfeits his sword and his hand." Meryn Trant hesitated. He did not know how to hesitate well. He had spent his life going forward. The pause confused his body and made his mouth hang open. Ser Mandon Moore's eyes rolled in a face that did not change, like marbles in milk. Only Boros Blunt, sweating and red, tugged at his blade as if the thing were stuck. Ned heard the whispering hiss of 100 swords not being drawn. He stepped up to Joffrey and took the boy's shoulders in his hands. Joffrey jerked back in indignation, then panic. "You unsheathe against the king." The boy yelped, though no steel was out. "Mother!" Cersei moved forward and found 2 of the gold cloaks standing in her path, helms lowered. She looked to Janos Slynt. His face was solemn as a prayer. He nodded once. "Lord Baelish," Ned said without turning. "You will accompany the queen to her rooms and count each coin of the crown's plate that remains. Varys, you will call for the High Septon to attend me here." "Oh my," Petyr murmured. But Ned heard the obedience when the man began to move. Cersei laid a hand on his sleeve as he came near. "Petyr," she said softly, and put all the secrets of silk in his name. "Your Grace," Petyr said, and bowed so low his feather quivered against his cap. When he rose, he did not meet her eye. The world did not break into pieces like paper. It bent. That was all. The remainder of the morning was an arrangement of bending things. Joffrey was led away by Barristan, his protests gathering in his mouth as if he were tasting his own authority for the first time and finding it bitter. Tommen went with his sister without a word, clutching her hand as if he remembered a story in which lions got lost in snow. Cersei walked between gold cloaks with her head high and her eyes killing. Pycelle tottered beside them, making soothing noises. Renly watched and said nothing. When it was done, people gone, voices dispersed, guards posted like new statues. Ned stood in the emptied throne room and listened to the bell take patience from stone. "Stannis," he said softly to Varys, "send him word. Tell him the city is under my hand. Tell him to come." "I will," Varys said, his voice as smooth as the floor. "He knows. He will come. The winds that blow to Dragonstone do not always carry courtesies, but they carry news." "And Renly," Ned said. "Lord Renly heard all he wished to hear," Varys murmured. "He listens with the ears of Highgarden these days. If you would hold him now with steel." "I will not arrest my king's brother," Ned said. "No," Varys said, regretful as a harp. Then he will flee the city before dusk. He did. Renly Baratheon left as the sun slid down the sky like spilled ale, with a dozen close men and the smell of flowers clinging to their cloaks. Ned did not attempt to stop him. He posted men at the gates under Janos Slynt's eyes and did not look toward the southern road. When the gates had been sealed that morning, great beams had slammed into iron sheaths with the force of a commandment. He heard that sound again in his mind when the guards lifted those beams for the Lord of Storm's end. He told himself it was because Renly was not a Lannister, and because the city's peace did not require he be caged. He told himself many things, and any one of them could have been true. That night Sansa came to his chambers with her hands plucked raw, the skin around her nails red as berries. She swore she had not been crying, and he did not say he knew she had. "Father Joffrey," she began, and then stopped, and stared at the floor, and then looked up again with an expression he had found on Catelyn's face when their firstborn sickened. Love and fear braided so tightly they became something new. "He said he will have me as his queen." He said it, but they took his sword away. They took him away. Will you be unkind to him?" "I will be just to him," Ned said. "Not the same," she whispered. "No," he said, "not the same." He put a hand to her head and felt a tremor go through her like a harp string. "Your mother taught you to love songs," he said. "Songs are made by men who put an end on every story. The world does not always abide. Will Arya be unkind to him?" Sansa asked then, as if she had finally told the truth she had brought with her, in case he chose truth to answer. "Arya will be Arya," Ned said, and that, surprisingly, eased something in Sansa's face. She leaned into his hand as if it were a thing she remembered rather than a thing she despairingly desired. He kissed her hair and wished briefly for winter, for the relief of it, for a field of snow in which you could read tracks and know what had passed. Arya had vanished into the quiet places of the Red Keep as easily as a cat. He found her at last in the small hall where Syrio Farrell liked to command ghosts. The Braavosi was there, a wooden sword under his arm like a staff, his bird-bright eyes watching her move. She was red-cheeked and sweating, and she made her feet quick when she turned. "There is a thing I tell all my girls," Syrio called out. "I tell them the body is armor around a singing heart. Sometimes the song is joy, sometimes the song is war. If you damp the song you drown. Sing." Arya saw Ned and froze. She did not run to him. She stood in her stance, as if a father were just another thing to be danced around. "We sealed the gates," she said. "Syrio says it is like in the songs before a storm." "It is like the songs after a storm too," Ned said. "No one sings those as loudly." Syrio bowed. "You make good weather of a bad sea, Lord. The girl will be a storm under any sky. I approve." "Keep her close," Ned said, "and arm your words like swords." The days that followed were a different city laid over the old. The gold cloaks held the gates. Their presence made every entrance into the city feel like a judgment. The markets continued, with fear running under their chatter like a thin river. Bread cost more. So did onions, so did small things like wax and salt. Varys's birds brought him 100 more murmurs. The crown's jewels were counted and sat with the silence of stones. Pycelle wrung his hands. The High Septon came, slow and significant, to bless the king's sleep and weigh Ned's soul with his eyes and not find it wanting or worth praising. Cersei made a kingdom out of her apartments. She received Peter Baelish once with a smile that had pressed itself thin. He brought her nothing, no knife, no key, and took away nothing except knowledge, which had weighed enough. When Janos Slynt placed guards at her doors, she called them dogs, and then fed them sugar when they looked hungriest. When Varys came to ask what comforts she required, she told him to bring her lions. He brought her an old tapestry instead. Aegon with his dragons hovering over men who could not shield their faces. She stared at it for a long time without moving and then turned and asked for more wine. Joffrey sulked and raged and attempted to intimidate men who had killed for smaller slights. He was a boy in a gilded room with no sword. Sansa was permitted to visit him twice each week. She went with her hair brushed until it shone like chestnut armor, and came back with a set mouth and little cuts on her palms, and spoke kindly of Tommen when she could not speak kindly of Joffrey. Arya, who adored no room with curtains, refused to attend him and spent her afternoons in the yard with Syrio and wooden swords, which cured melancholy better than tears. From Dragonstone came the first raven after 7 days. It said only, "We wait upon the confirmation of the king's death and the assembly of those lawful to witness the matter of succession." It bore Stannis Baratheon's hand like a dried leaf pressed into wax. "Lawful," Peter murmured in the council, making the word seem somehow indelicate. "Lawful men are so difficult to find. I am certain his lordship will bring some with him in a hamper." "Mind your tongue," Barristan said in a tone that would have shamed any squire. "Mind your sword," Peter answered pleasantly, and then did not mention Stannis for the rest of the meeting. Tywin Lannister's answer to the closing of the city came on horse hoof and fire. The Riverlands burned. The mountain was seen near Duskendale. Edmure Tully's outriders brought in men half-flayed, men with their feet cut and their hands nailed where feet should be. Catelyn Stark reached her father at Riverrun with dust in her hair and grief like a boy huddled inside her cloak. Robb Stark called the Banners of the North because he was his father's son and would have done so if Ned had told him not to. The word reached Ned on a morning when a gull had drowned in a cistern and the dead thing floating there looked like a discarded glove. He read the letter twice, then pressed his thumb into the wax so hard the seal fractured. "Leave it," Varys said. "Do not rush north. Not yet. The river carries more than water. Carries war, and the stink of it sinks into you. Here, at least, your stink may be covered with cinnamon." Ned ignored that. "Have we heard from the Vale?" He did not say Lysa's name. It tasted like a door slamming. "Only that the Lady of the Eyrie keeps her son safe and the high road closed." "What of Tyrion Lannister?" Ned asked. "Gone from the Vale as if a trap door had opened beneath his heels while he took his breakfast," Varys murmured. "He is said to have found friends amongst the clans of the mountains. Lord Tywin will find good use for him. He is a clever coin." "Clever coin buys poison," Peter said, and smiled down the table as if he and Varys had rehearsed. "Clever coin buys songs that end well, too. He will persuade someone to sing for Lord Lannister. Perhaps he will sing about your gates, Lord Stark. I hope it is in tune." Tyrion came to his father's camp with skin like parchment and a grin like a knife turned out at the table to show it was not clean. He brought with him men who stank of furs, men who laughed dried blood, men who would cut you apart for the delight of seeing your pieces. He made a jest before the tent of war about kings and gates and boys with swords, and Tywin did not laugh. He told his son to sleep and eat and be at his right hand in the morning. He told his brother Kevan to keep the foragers wide and the scouts wider. He told his bannermen they would push the wolves backwards and burn their tails so they would not wag again. Across the river, Robb Stark crossed the twins with the price of marriage in his saddle and grimness in his bones. He moved like a snowborn river, quiet and cold, and no one saw how fast he ran until he had already swept around Jaime Lannister's camp and caught the Kingslayer where the woods grew thickest and the men could not put their banners up without snagging them on branches. In the confusion of twilight and horns and shouts, when horses screamed like men, when the first arrow was loosed and the first will was broken, Jaime moved like a man who had never lost anything except time. He killed 3 men and took a 4th's hand because it was in his way and would not move. He looked up and saw the boy from the north. He smiled because what else could he do? Then something struck his helm and stars poured in. And when he woke hours later, he was blind with a sack over his head, and his wrists were bound, and the wolves were closer, and they did not sound the same as they had in his hunting dreams. War arranged itself into questions. At King's Landing, the question was what to do with a queen who would not relinquish the idea that the king was her son. In the north and the Riverlands, the question was what to do with a father who would not relinquish pride even when pride was bleeding out through 100 tiny cuts. On Dragonstone, the question sat in the mouth of a cave and looked like a red woman and more crows than the world needed. Stannis Baratheon called his men and called his ships and called his brother a fool into the sea spray. He did not call himself king aloud. He did not have to. When he sailed, he did not sail in secret. There were too many oars, Too many sails, too much of everything. When his raven reached Ned a day prior, it said only we come by law. Do not open the gates for any man in green. Ned pushed it toward Varys, who made a small sound. Law? The eunuch said, a little sadly. It is a beautiful sail, but cannot always catch the wind. You would have me raise a different flag? Ned asked. I would have you raise 100, one for each heart in this city. Varys sighed. But you have chosen the stiffest cloth. The High Septon came again when Stannis' fleet was sighted, lumbering and vast like a man wearing a tower. Ned treated him as if he were a man. They sat in the same room where, months ago, Ned had eaten with Robert and listened to the king remember a woman whose name he thought he had forgotten. The High Septon lifted his hands and let them fall in his lap. We do not crown bastards, he said. The faith will not. The realm cannot bear such sin. But what will you have of me? Witness, Ned said. Truth must be witnessed. Men lie with roaring mouths. Truth whispers. Send for your most devout. Bring them to the Red Keep. When Lord Stannis arrives, we will weigh a matter with laws in one pan and love in the other. Love? The High Septon peered beneath his eyebrows, surprised. Ned thought of Sansa looking up at a boy with a sword. He thought of Cersei's mouth when she said no. He thought of Robert's hand reaching for a cup. Love turns men, he said. It will turn us or break us. Stannis Baratheon came ashore with the city watching. His face did not look like a face that could love much. It looked like a cliff. Davos Seaworth walked at his side with his eyes turned toward the ground. Men said he looked like a man in glee because he sometimes smiled, but that was only because he knew what hunger was and he was not hungry now. The small folk muttered. The brother, one said and spat. King's brother. Another said, he brought ships, in a tone that made ships sound like bread. The Tyrell men, few in the city because Renly had taken his corps with him, looked to their captain and found only confusion, because they were keeps without castles now. The meeting was in the throne room again. Ned had decided against the Great September. He could not trust a crowd. It would take only one stone from one hand to turn the city into something he would not be able to mend. Barristan Selmy stood under the throne stairs with his white cloak falling in lines as clean and hopeless as the room. Varys faded against a column. Peter Baelish looked like a man who wished he had a window. Janos Slynt wore the expression of a butcher distinguishing between two perfectly good cuts of meat. Cersei sat where she did not belong on a chair that had been dragged in for her. Legs crossed, hair down, green silk pooling as if it wanted to run. She had asked to bring Joffrey. Ned had refused. She had not demanded. The refusal had been the first defeat she acknowledged. Stannis walked to the center of the hall without looking left or right. He did not glance at the Iron Throne. His eyes were a sea storm, cold and precise. He stopped and looked at Ned. You made a city out of a trap, he said. I made it safe, Ned said. You turned my brother's bedchamber into a prison, Stannis said. He did not say, you should have held the lioness while I ran. He did not say, you gave Renly a day's grace for your honor, which is a costly coin. He let his eyes say all that and more. I see my brother is dead. I will have a crown. By law, Ned said, and the word contained all the weight of stone. But first by truth, and then by mercy. Stannis's mouth made a small hard motion. Mercy is not always lawful. No, Ned said. He gestured, and the High Septon and 4 of the most devout were brought in like a bar of music carried by tired men. He gestured again, and Cersei rose with the slow indignation of a queen pretending to be a lady. She stood and held her head as if it balanced something the size of the realm. The queen will answer the charge that the children called the kings are not of his body, Ned said. She will do so before the faith and before the realm. Cersei laughed, and to her credit it was real. I will not, she said. What will you do? She turned to the High Septon. Will you take off my gown and parade me naked? Will you weigh my hair in your holy scale? You will answer, Stannis said. She looked at him with pure contempt. I will not answer a narrow lord who has never smiled without counting it. Stannis took a step forward. His voice did not rise. "The realm will know. You may keep your lies. I will not keep them for you." Ned saw it then, the shape of the thing, the way it would cut. He had hoped for a confession. He had hoped for a strike that would end argument as the head ends the body. He would not get it. He looked at the High Septon. "The faith holds that the seed is strong," he said. The old man nodded slowly. "We are not fools. We have eyes. The king's children are not the king's. We will not crown a boy who is not of the line. We will not." The High Septon agreed, voice thick. In the end, truth did not need Cersei's mouth to prove itself. It had other mouths. Witnesses were called, servants with sharp tongues who had been slapped for looking too long at a lord's hair, midwives who had handled royal babies and left the room bewildered at what they had felt and not dared say, a man who had served Lord Arryn and whom fear had kept silent until this day, a bastard boy of the city, a young man grown tall who had made a cart for his mother and carved little animals into its rails, was brought in with trembling hands, and he looked so much like Robert that even Peter did not smile. The hall shivered. Cersei sat like something carved from wood, eyes so bright Ned feared they would burn her hair. After it, the faith pronounced. After it, Stannis stood remote as a cliff. After it, Ned said, "The queen and her children will be held, as now, but not in shame. They will live. They will not be harmed." Stannis's head moved a fraction. "The boy who called himself king will take the black," he said flatly. "The younger boy and the girl will be sent to Casterly Rock. The queen will be confined." Cersei laughed again, and this time it was a blade. "To my father's mercy?" she said. "You think you have built a prison for me, Lord? You have built one for yourselves. This is mercy," Ned said, softly enough he thought only the High Septon would hear. "For all of us." "I would cut the heads from weeds," Stannis said. "You choose to prune. I choose to live in a garden that may yet bear fruit," Ned answered. And now Stannis did look at him, long, measuring, grudging. The proclamations were written. The city watch carried them to the gates and to every square. The sept bells rang. The ships in the harbor hung their flags as if they were listening. In the square before Baelor September, a man shouted that the boy king had become a black brother, and two boys laughed, and one of them did not know that the laughter he heard behind him was the laughter of men who believed themselves safe. Joffrey heard his sentence in a room hung with green. He stood too straight, as if he had always been a soldier and not a boy. When the words came, he made a sound that was not an order and not a cry. Sansa, who had been allowed to stand near the back with a scepter beside her, made no sound at all and did not move until Joffrey's eyes found hers. For the space of a heartbeat, he looked like a child clutching a branch in a storm. Then his mouth twisted. "I will be back," he hissed. "I will be king." Sansa, who had learned more about mercy in 2 weeks than in 2 years of songs, did not answer. She went home to her tower and was sick in a basin until it went pink. Arya, who had been told after that because Ned was not foolish enough to let her watch mercy done to an enemy she had dreams about killing, took Sirio's wooden sword and broke it against a post in 3 pieces, then looked at the splinters as if they had betrayed her and could not remember the shapes they had once held. Tywin Lannister learned of his grandson's fate in a pavilion that smelled of vellum and hard cheese, the stink of a traveling court, the scent of iron cleaned from gloves that never learned what blood was. He made no sound. He looked at the parchment as if it had been folded badly. Tyrion, who had brought him a dozen other tidings, felt his father's silence like the roll of thunder just beyond the hill. Later, by the light of a candle that made a pool of gold on the table, Tywin said, "He takes the black." Tyrion, who knew of boys and men on that wall and the cold that ate them, blew out a breath. "It is neat," he said, "neater than sending him to me flayed." "He should have died," Tywin said, and did not say, "He is my blood." He did not say, "I will die and there will be no sons to carry me." He did not say anything except, "We will make them pay." "The city is closed," Tyrion said lightly. "They keep their own coin now, I hear." The hand paid the watch with his honor. "I doubt there is much small change left." "We do not need the city," Tywin said. "We will make the Riverlands bleed until the wolf comes down to pull his father from his hole. We have one king in the south now and one pretender in the Stormlands. Let them devour each other, and then we will choose which bones to pick." "You never did like salads," Tyrion murmured. He drank wine and thought of snow and of boys who went to walls because they had nowhere else to go, and of a sister who would break her nails scratching at a door they had given her a key to long ago and then taken away. The wall was not a punishment that could be spoken of as a way of making a man better. It was a life. Joffrey traveled north with a small escort and a great indignation. Gold cloaks surrounded him like a moving cage. He attempted twice to bribe a guard and once to seduce a kitchen girl. The first time he was hit across the mouth, and his jaw bruised a purer purple than any cloak he had ever been allowed to wear. The second time the girl laughed. He turned red. By the time they reached the cold that lived in the air like a person at White Harbor, he was quieter. At the wall, where men in black were mostly too tired to remember that stories had kings in them, he became boy and you there, and once, bitterly from a man with bad teeth, "Your Grace." He was not the first boy to learn what it was to cut his hands on rope. Jon Snow saw him only once at a distance as a lad with strange nudity at his head. No gilding, no crown. Standing with his back to the wind and refusing to shiver. Jon did not go closer. He felt the world had shifted in the south like a plate lifted at one end, but the wall did not tilt for any king. It came out of the ground and it went up into the sky, and it made everything else smaller. Samwell Tarly came to him with 2 fat fish in his hands, delighted that they were his to hold. "There is a prince among us," he said, giggling. "Or a king, or a donkey painted gold. I forget which." "Let him carry wood," Jon said. And then he thought of a different boy king, and of a day when bells had rung over a hall in the south that he had never seen, and of a father whose honor was a sword he had not learned how to wield without cutting himself. Jon turned his face toward the north. The weather looked like old iron. Renly's camp in the Stormlands smelled like clover and hot leather. He had meant to ride straight to Highgarden, but the wind made a beast of itself and drove him inland. Besides, a message had arrived from Mace Tyrell promising much splendor if Renly would only come and wear it. Renly laughed and wore it in his mind first. He wore a crown of roses and gold. He wore victories like cloaks. Loras Tyrell put his hand on Renly's wrist and drew a flower in the dirt with his boot, then crushed it and smiled. "We will make a better song," he said. He meant better than Stannis's Iron March. He meant better than Robert had sung, with his voice thick with wine and longing. In the mornings he trained with Renly and beat him as often as he let him win. At night they spoke of storms and ships and men. He spoke of Ned Stark sometimes, with a kind respect that had no passion in it. Renly did not remember to hate the hand for closing the gates, because he could not hate someone who had made such a clean virtue of his own doom. "His doom is in the north," Renly said one evening. "His boy will pull him away like a hound hauling its master by the cuff. Or perhaps he will pull his boy back," Loras murmured. "They wear leashes on their honor in the north. It is a thing you cannot smell until you are very near." Davos Seaworth stood in the king's, Stannis's, office in the Red Keep and felt less comfortable than when he had been smuggling onions under a moon that had poxes. The room smelled of old wood and old decisions. Stannis had brought his austerity with him and placed it on the council like a cold dish. He read petitions and made answers. He looked to Ned for matters of the city and to Davos for matters of ships. He did not look to Melisandre for anything in front of men, which was perhaps the same as looking to her for everything when they were alone. Davos did not speak of her. He spoke of docks and of war. "The Lannisters do not give what they do not have to give," he said. "They have rage and men. We hold their daughter. We hold the son that is not their son. It is not the same." "They have gold," Stannis said. "It is better than men." "Gold is like a woman," Melisandre said from where she leaned heavily on Shadow in the corner. "It goes to the man who warms it." Ned turned his head and let his eyebrows show his disapproval. She smiled. Fire licked the candle in front of her with a cat's tongue. "We will not burn men," Ned said. "Will we burn our chances?" she asked sweetly. "We will hold to law," Stannis said, impatient. He did not meet her eyes. "We will hold to strategy." Kevin Lannister is no fool. He counsels Tywin to consolidate around Harrenhal. The Lannister host cannot st. Orem King's Landing without more ships than they own and a queen regent to rally gossip. We have both. We wait. We let the North and Riverlands cut their king's lair into the shape of a prisoner and send him to us. And then, Ned said, we end a war with a letter rather than a blade. Melisandre tilted her head. You are a man who eats cold truth. One day you will choke. One day we all will, Ned said. News traveled odd roads. While ravens flew and horsemen galloped, while men shouted to each other across rivers, while women whispered behind hands, other messages moved in stranger ways. A rumor flickered that Joffrey had died on the road north, his throat cut, blood bright on snow. Another said he had reached the wall and become a lord in a week and a day. At the same time, a merchant claimed to have seen the queen laugh with the hand and the king's brother, and a cut-purse swore he had seen her strangle a guard with her own hair. Songs sprouted with questionable roots. One sang of a wolf who locked a lioness in a garden and grew lilies around her so high she forgot how to roar. A less kind one suggested the lioness would chew through the stems and be out by morning. Catelyn Stark came to the city with river mud on her hem and grief in her hands. She kissed Ned in the courtyard because there were no guards close enough to see. If I can forgive you for being alive, she whispered into his beard with a smile that kept water out of her eyes. You can forgive me for this mud. She met Stannis with a cool courtesy that was the same courtesy she would have given his shadow. She brought news of Robb and of Jaime in chains. She brought grief for father and for home. Ned took it all and gave back what he could. He gave her the sight of their daughters alive. He gave her the promise that Robb's name would keep its honor. He gave her a room with a window that looked east, to a sea that moved constantly. They met with Stannis one night when the wind had blown the smell of the sea far inland and the city felt like a ship. The Queen's presence and the fate of the Lannisters hung over the wooden table like a pall of smoke. Catelyn set the cup down and laid her hands flat on the wood. Send the girl and the younger boy home, she said. Home. Stannis's voice carried disbelief like an unpleasant perfume. To Casterly Rock, Catelyn said. Send them with men who cannot be bought, men of the Vale perhaps. Tell Lord Tywin that if he ceases war and kneels and gives you the fealty he owes and the coin he owes, and hostages for his good behavior, his grandchildren will be safely kept in their mother's childhood rooms. Keep the queen here. Let him choose what weight to give to blood. When he comes, if he comes, to kneel, you will have the chance to turn a lion into a lord. If he does not, he will not, Stannis said. He may, Ned said softly. His pride is a mountain, but he loves his blood. He would carry that mountain on his shoulders to make a road for them. Melisandre laughed. Men push mountains with a finger when they see a woman ahead of them. He will not kneel. He will stand, and you will break against him. We have the city, Stannis said, as if that were a prayer. We have the throne. Thrones do not feed men, Davos murmured. Bread does. The Riverlands are burning. If they burn long enough, there will be nothing to feed the city when winter comes. He did not say snow. He did not say cold. He did not say that sometimes hunger is not held at a gate by men with spears. We can end this with one more letter, one more gesture, Ned said. Send Tommen and Myrcella to the rock. Both, Stannis asked. Why both? Because one can be hidden in a barrel, Peter said from near the window, having slipped into the room as soon as a servant left it, which was his way. Two will be paraded on the walls. Besides, the girl is worth 10 boys when her father is a man like Tywin. He will not have built his house as a square and seen 3 sides collapse without attempting to shore up the 4th with his own ribs. Stannis turned his head toward the hand. His mouth had become a straight mark of addition or subtraction. I mean to rule, he said, not to barter. Kings barter every hour, Ned said. Sometimes they do it with bread, sometimes with blood, sometimes with promises. If this offends you, we will call it judgment rather than trade. We judge that the children have done no deeds to merit the wall. We judge that mercy exercised upon them buys us peace. He felt the room lurch around him. He had not meant to say buys. He saw Stannis look at him narrowly and saw Catelyn's face ease, and he did not look at Peter Baelish, who must have been smiling again. Melisandre whispered something that turned a candle wick black. Davos scratched at the scarred ends of his fingers. In the morning, Tommen and Myrcella left the city through the river gate under guard. Cersei stood at a window and watched and did not blink. When they passed beyond her sight, she bent, at last, over her knees and pressed her mouth into her own skirt until the green silk went dark with her breath. Ned stood in the corridor and let her have that grief without a watcher, because he was not wholly made of law. The letter went to Tywin with them. It was simple. It had Stannis's name and the hands and the High Septons. It had words that could have been carved into stone. Men read it and took it to have been carved in their bones. Tywin read it and said, "We will offer truce. We will ask for Jaime as a token of good faith. We will accept when they say no. Then we will move. They will say yes," Tyrion said, because he had seen mercy and had not forgotten it. He had also seen the mountain and known that sometimes it tried to move. "They will say no," Tywin said, because the world had taught him that men like Eddard Stark did not understand the true costs of things. At Riverrun, Robb wanted to keep Jaime and count him, like a coin in his pocket that issued a sound every time he moved his hand. Catelyn looked at her son, so young and trying to be a man so fast, he would lose skin off his heart like knees skinned on stones. She touched his cheek and said, "Send him, trust." The boy who had crossed the twins became the boy who sent the Kingslayer west in chains under people of the Vale whose names few men remembered. Blackfish Tully organized it with a disgusted efficiency only family could blunt. It went badly because the world seldom allows a clean straight line to remain straight. 3 times men tried to intercept the column. Twice they were not Lannisters at all but Sellswords who thought they would make a name. The 3rd time they were Lannisters, and the Vale cracked them between 2 wings of soldiers like a nut. Jaime arrived at King's Landing with a shiner on his jaw and an expression that was not chastened. He looked at the city walls with interest. He looked at the sealed gates with admiration. He looked at his sister's windows without heat. When he stood in the hall before Stannis and Ned, he smiled a little. "And here we are," he said, "knights visiting kings like beggars at a feast." He went home within the week with 2 children and none of his honor. He rode out the river gate with Myrcella's hand in his fist and Tommen jouncing on a pony beside him, looking back every other step as if he could not fathom the idea that the city was growing smaller. Jaime did not look back. He did not leave a joke behind him. He left a silence so big it changed the temperature of every conversation for 3 days. In the west, Tywin received his children and did not smile. He went to his cellars and looked at his stores and saw winter, and the expression that crossed his face then lingered. He met with his captains and with Kevan and with Tyrion. "We will step back," he said, and no one in the tent breathed for a time. "We will feed the west and sharpen our knives. We will send our oaths to the king. We will not kneel." He looked at Jaime, who had brought him more than children. "We will wait. You cannot wait forever when the world insists on moving." The Stormlands erupted into spring colors that wore armor and gold. Renly set a crown on his head that looked becoming. The Reach sent him flowers and men and songs. He moved toward the capital like a man who walks toward a lover, sure of his welcome. Stannis moved to meet him because he could not bear the insult to law and blood and grievance. Ned asked for time and did not receive it. Time shrugged. Men gathered. Catelyn went to their camps because someone had to. She rode between 2 kings like a woman carrying bread between 2 furnaces. She met Renly first and saw that he was what the South wanted to be when it grew up. He had a smile that made the sky bluer. He had Loras, who watched him with a devotion that would have made the maiden blush. His tent smelled of roses and metal. "Lady Stark," Renly said, with warmth, "we will make peace and carve it up like a pie, and winter will have nothing to eat." "The law is not a pie," Catelyn said. He shrugged. "It should be. Then everyone could eat a little." She went from that to Stannis, where the tent smelled of tallow and patience. He greeted her like a man receiving a summons to his own house for a debt he had not yet paid. He repeated that law was law and said the word like a poker you used to stir the fire. Catelyn told him the North wanted peace and bread and the return of men who were now ghosts. Stannis listened because he always listened when the world complained, and then ignored because he always did what his own mind told him was cleanest. They met with their entourages. They spoke. The words were swords. She raised her hands and said, "You are brothers." "Was," Stannis said. The night that followed was one of those that songs remember badly. A wind came up from the sea that tasted of iron. Strange lights played in the sky, as if the world's ceiling had been built of glass and someone had lit a candle above it. Men spoke of omens. Men spoke of tricks. Men spoke of shadows moving like they had been sent for. In the morning, Renly Baratheon's tent stood with its flap open, and his bed within it was empty. Some said he had run to see a comet. Some said a shadow had killed him. Some said Loras had cut his throat when Renly changed his mind about everything. The simplest truth was that men died even when they were young and green. Renly's green banners came down. The roses survived. They always do. The Tyrells had to choose another sun to orbit. They turned their faces toward Lannisport and began counting coin and measuring bread and whispering to Petyr Baelish. Petyr returned to the capital with a new smile and an old debt to pay. He told Ned at council that the Reach wished to feed the city and would bring their wagons to the gates. He told Stannis that the Tyrells had no interest in law but very much interest in weddings. He told Varys that the balance had been restored, which was a lie, because balances in this world are like bridges. They sway. Ned stood one evening under a sky turning the color of bruised grapes and listened to the city. The cries had changed since he first closed the gates. Now they were the noises of a beast that has learned its pen and does not bite its keeper as often. He watched the river and thought of ice. He thought of a raven that would come one day, who knows when, with a note about dead men walking. He thought of Jon and did not let fear make his hands shake. He went back into the Tower of the Hand and found Arya building a toy gate with stacked books, and Sansa embroidering a lion that had somehow become a wolf without her knowing. He kissed the tops of their heads and felt the enormous and terrifying ordinariness of being a father in a world that had insisted on making him a lord. In the morning, scouts brought word of lions at the borders of the Reach. In T. He south the Tyrells moved carefully and waited to see whether a king would ask for their food with his hands or his knees. In the west, Tywin counted, always counted, and plotted and placed and waited for winter to make kings small. Stannis ruled like a man who had learned how to count only to be sure he had enough to give nothing away. He and Ned fought 3 times in 3 weeks and then agreed 4 times in 4. They were not friends, but the city survived between them like a child between 2 stern parents. When autumn came, a wind sharpened itself on the city's corners. The bells rang for small things instead of large weddings, a harvest, thanks for rain. The gates remained watched but not closed in spirit. Those who meant harm could no longer walk in pretending they did not. Those who meant no harm no longer had to fear that the harm would find them as easily. The queen remained in her rooms with the sea looking at her window through eyes of gulls. She drank and she planned and she folded her silk gowns and unfolded them. She taught herself patience because she no longer had a choice. On a day when the sun flared like a coin in heaven, a ship came into Blackwater Bay with a striped sail from a place where men spoke Valyrian in more than just the shape of their mouths. It brought whispers of a girl with dragons, a girl who had gone into a fire and come out more alive. Varys listened to the whispers and touched his lip with 2 fingers as if he had cut it. Ned listened and thought for the first time about fire not as a war's toy but as a thing that walks. Stannis said that Targaryen fire burned a long time ago and would not be permitted to light again. Melisandre smiled and said, "Fire makes new laws." Davos said he did not like sailors' tales. Petyr suggested that the Tyrells would prefer a frosting of dragon over their bread rather than a crust of iron. "The realm has had enough kings," Ned said. "We will not import fire." Varys nodded. "Oh yes," he said. "We must try not to import fire. We have the gift of kindling enough." In the north, the first snow fell. At the wall, Joffrey Baratheon learned to walk with snow in his boots and to keep his mouth shut more often. He had been beaten twice. He had been cold every day. The older brothers ignored him until he stopped stinking of himself and started to stink like them. Somehow he found a skill with a bow, because bows forgive arrogance if the eye is true. He did not become good. He became bearable. Jon watched him at a distance and thought, this is what mercy looks like when it survives winter. On an evening when 100 lamps made the city seem like a map of stars fell to earth, Ned stood with Catelyn above the river and thought of the road they had not taken. Had I knelt to the boy when Cersei demanded it, he said, I would be dead and the girls would be orphans with a mother who would visit their graves. You would be a dead good man, Catelyn said simply, and I am grateful you are a complicated living one. He put his arm around her and felt the warmth under her cloak. The seal in his chest that had been formed the day he paid coin to Janos Slynt clicked open. He allowed himself the smallest piece of understanding. You cannot hold the world with clean hands. You can hold to the law with hands that have paid men to do what they should have done without coin. You can close a gate and be merciful. You can open a gate and be cruel. You can love your children and send other people's children away. Later, when a raven came, black against an evening sky that kept all its secrets, with a letter from the wall that did not say exactly what the cold was, only that it was, Ned closed his eyes and did not see gates. He saw fields. He saw a boy's face grown to a man's. He saw steel. He opened his eyes and said to Stannis, winter is truth. We must ready the city for a season in which no one sings. If the realm must spend its swords, we must spend them north. We are not done with lions, Stannis said. We may not be done with anything, Ned answered, but we will begin. Cersei Lannister, who had learned the length and breadth of her cage, watched the gulls circle and counted their wings as if they were ships on the horizon. She counted there, too, another sort of ship, the one that sails in a woman's mind when her children go west and she goes nowhere. She whispered to herself that the gates could always be opened. She whispered that the man who sealed them would grow old and the men who guarded them would go to sleep. She whispered that lions do not garden. She whispered that winter kills flowers. She whispered so long she began to hear a lapping sound like water at a hull. When she fell asleep, she dreamed of a ship that burned and did not sink. Ned slept as poorly as he ever had, and rose in the morning to make the city wake again. He found Janos Slynt in the yard watching a group of new recruits take their licks from an old swordmaster who had very few smiles. He watched the watch a long time and wondered which coin they obeyed today and whether, in his lifetime, men would ever obey the right things for the right reasons and whether it mattered if the right things got done for reasons that would curdle in the mouth. He put his hand on the railing and felt the wood's warmth. The gates are sealed? He asked. For now, Slynt said, until you say otherwise. Keep them sealed, Ned said, but let bread through. Let men through who come with the wind at their backs and a road under their feet and mean no harm. Let those who mean harm understand that our gates are not just doors, but eyes. Janos Slynt bowed. It looked strange on him, as if his neck were not used to bending. As you say, Lord Hand, and pay your men, Ned said. On time. I will, Slynt said, and smiled with small eyes that had found a way to be content. It is a strange thing to say, but the city is quieter when the watch has coin. Men are quieter when their bellies are not hunting, Ned said. He looked out across the city. The roofs were like scales, the streets were veins, the river was a breath. He thought of winter and of pathways through it. He thought of a boy with hair like summer straw pulling a bowstring back until it sang. He thought of a girl whose sword had broken into splinters and who would ask for another. He thought of a queen counting gulls. He thought of a king who had been his friend and then his sorrow. He thought of law and of mercy and of the strange currencies by which men pay each other. He thought of gates. He thought of how easy they were to close and how hard to open correctly. He thought of how, sometimes, the only thing you could do was to be the hinge. In a city given to songs that always want to be about heroes, men would one day sing that Ned Stark paid the watch and sealed the gates. They would leave out what came after because songs cannot carry the whole world. But in the quiet between verse and verse, there would be room for a different music made of the sounds of a city that did not burn that year, of children laughing in a courtyard where no swords were drawn, of boots marching to the north, of bells that rang not for death but for bread, of a throne room where a paper had been torn and a will had been done anyway, of a woman mourning and being permitted to mourn. It was thin music. It was enough.